just like seeing her for the first time.
One day a giant crack appeared out of nowhere. A blue aura came out of it and quickly spread throughout the world. People called it mana. A minority especially sensitive to mana received an ability from its influence. Such people began to be called awakened. After that, the mana storm ended, but the crack in the sky remained, and after some time when people got used to the existence of the awakened mana storms passed throughout the world and portals appeared. The military fenced off one of these places from civilians, but at one point the portal light changed to red, which promised danger. The military turned around and saw how the portal cracked, and a huge ugly monster with 2 heads came out of the crack. After that, mana storms began to be called gates. As soon as the monsters appeared in this world, people were shocked, and the military opened fire, but were unable to cope with it. Civilians had to run away from the gate in panic, so as not to suffer the same fate, but among them were the awakened ones who did not run away when they saw the danger, and they began to fight the monsters. From that moment on, the world went through a cataclysm. Remembering the appearance of the Gatethi protagonist, Shin Junio ran through the ice cave with the thought that everything would change when he became awakened. He didn't want to work tirelessly anymore. It's not that he dreamed of being worried by everyone, he just didn't want to be beaten, Arabed, but he didn't want to use violence either. Remembering the death of his comrades in that cave, he stopped and created a dagger in his hand, then threw it straight at the ice golem, but the weapon bounced off its hard body and pierced the ceiling. His breathing quickened in horror, and then the monster rushed to attack and struck, but he was able to block it and stand on his feet, but the ice under his feet cracked. He felt a shudder and panicked, and then the ice broke and he fell. He just wanted to have someone he could call a friend, but even that, he thinks, was too big a dream. Ended up falling into the icy water, a useless drink. He was ridiculed every time he introduced himself as a hunter. His body was sucked to the very bottom. He knew that one day he would die like this, but suddenly there was a bright flash. The monster, meanwhile, had already decided that he was dead, but suddenly he felt the fluctuation of energy below and turned around. Frozen in place from the depths, Junio began to rise, walking on daggers-like steps. He knew that one day he would die, but he still didn't want toast opening in front of the monster. He lowered his head, and his opponent raised his hands above his head, clenching into a fist. MC looked up at him, his eyes sparkling, meaning that he didn't want Todi so helpless. Immediately after that, dozens of sharp blades pierced the body of the ice golem and dug deeper, causing it to fall. The daggers evaporated, and now numerous cracks were visible in his body. The weapons moved behind Junio, and he thought that if he could become stronger than everyone, even though he was a support, then maybe his life would have been completely different. The system activated and reported that he opened the flow. He fulfilled all the conditions. Become a player. The system welcomed him. A few hours earlier, Mick ran through the forest with all his strength because he did not want to be late on such an important day. He ran to the meeting place where 2 Sank hunters of the Dawn Guild were waiting for him. A melee fighter, a girl named Kim Jimnoda, said that he was finally here, and her comrade with the defender class named Lim Duan crossed his arms and exclaimed, "A newbie lit. He is the same as him in his days." The girl told him not to start, grumbling Woe was always late running up. To them, Junio stopped and caught his breath, apologizing to them for being late. He's a Dean creator, class support, who specializes in creating weapons. Danon told him with a smile not to be scared. Was just joking, he wasn't that late. Jim patted the newbie on the back with a smile, and agreed, saying that they could go here, and then added that Hyun, Woo and Dee were already there. Junio awkwardly agreed with them, and thought that things were bad. Months had passed since he joined the guild. This was his first dungeon and he was already late. There, it's the gate. And he looked up at it with confidence, mentally telling himself to get it together. This was the first dungeon he was going to as a support. He needed to prove his usefulness after. They went inside and joined up with Therist, of the team, the guildmaster of Dawn Mund, DA Bank Melee. Hunter came up to him. He spoke to him first, and asked if this was his first raid. Right, he confirmed his words, and said that this was his first time going as a support, but he had helped out in dungeons a couple of times. The guildmaster said that he needed to explain something to him. Then supports, unlike Fighters can't fight, so they need to pay attention to where he is. If he gets too close, there's a chance he'll get into a fight, and if he stands too far away, they won't be able to protect him. The point is to keep him at the optimal distance. Since he's a creator, he just needs to keep his distance and create daggers when he gives the signal. Easy, right? Juno, nervous lie, confirmed his words, and then asked doubtfully, is that really true? No other weapons are needed. He didn't let him finish, and confirmed his words, saying that he was the only one who needed an extra weapon. It's just a dungeon, and it's his first one too, so he shouldn't overdo it suddenly. The Lin Wu, a sank hunter who specializes in range combat, activated his magic and told them to stop. He could sense mana. There was a monster here, the guildmaster told everyone. To prepare for battle, they needed to keep in formation. Taeheon stepped forward, covering them, and they began to advance further into the cave. Dawn asked about the mana, and the mage replied that there were 3 small auras and 1 large one. The last one was large enough for the boss. Dawn thought it was strange. There was usually no boss here. He said that he would take on the boss and let them deal with the rest. After that he turned to Juno and asked how long it would take to create a dagger. If he hurried, he replied that it would take about seconds if he tried, but this dagger won't last even a minute. Guild leader pulled the mask off his face and smiled, asking him to start creating it. He'll be done with it in seconds. At that moment, a group of 4 monsters rushed to attack. These are crystal lizards, danger level D. This is a monster that grows on the mana stones of the dungeon. The appearance and abilities change depending on the absorbed mana stone. Taeheon said with a smile that he was going to start, and Jim warmed up her fists and agreed. After that, her comrade concentrated and, releasing powerful energy from himself, stomped his foot on the ice and, raising the shield of his head, hit it with all his might, scattering all the monsters. After that, Jim rushed to attack and clenched her hand into a fist and then struck the monster on the head, stunning him. After which she jumped behind him and he immediately fell to the ground unconscious. At this time, 2 monsters rushed at the rest of the group, and she, noticing this, thought that they were recovering faster than expected. She warned the others about the danger and exclaimed, is this magic? Hyun Woo stood behind him and began to conjure a saying that he was almost done. He shouted loudly, and then fireballs burst out of the magic circle, after which a huge explosion occurred, and the monsters were burned. He was glad that he succeeded, and Taeheon said that this Iskreet now let him help. At this moment, Juno began to create weapons, and looked at them in surprise, thinking that this was a great attack order. Now he understood how the guild fights. D called up to him, and asked what happened to Tuth weapons. He replied that it was almost done and told himself in his mind not to get distracted. He needed to focus us in an F-rank skill called creation. He created a small dagger, then grabbed it and threw it towards the guildmaster. Heck out it deftly, and used his ability to cover the blade in darkness. This is his AA skill called Shadow Weapon. S skill uses the user's weapon to transform it into a shadow weapon. Shadow weapons increase in quality and mana depending on the user's mana, and disappear after a while. Decharged, and approached the main monster, then lunged forward and cut off its head. The ice monster immediately died, and its corpse fell to the ground, and the weapon disappeared from the leader's hands. All the team members gathered together again, and Taeheon asked if anyone was hurt. Jim replied that she was fine, and MC thought that they were cooler than he imagined. Each of them is great, but they're teamworkies. Beyond praise, they can become the best when they achieve more. He looked down at his hand, annoyed that compredo them, he could only create 1 dagger. He hadn't helped them in any way, and he had gotten distracted. Did he deserve Tobe? With them noticing his mood, the guildmaster approached him and said that he did a great job. He wasn't hurt, right? He was a little confused and excitedly replied that he was fine, thanks to them. After a second he added that he wasn't that useful. He laughed awkwardly, and Dean asked what he was talking about. Thanks to his skill, he saved so much money. Ash had seen his skill absorbs weapons. He couldn't afford it, even if he bought the cheapest one. That's why he needed a creator. It seems that you need a weapon with mana to activate the skill, but he still did a great job for the first dungeon. He smiled, and added that he will look forward to next time. Let him not abandon them. Hearing this, Juno smiled and thanked him, saying that he will try his best. Taeheon was about to offer to collect the loot, but suddenly, everything in the cave shook, and they became very worried. Jim exclaimed, "Is it an earthquake?" you asked. Is the cave collapsing because they killed the boss? The MC pointed his finger forward, saying that there was a wall collapsing. The ice broke into pieces, revealing a passage to another place, and they decided to go there to check it out. Hyun Woo, who was walking ahead and lighting the way, said that it seemed to be a path that was connected to something. Dawn thought about it for a second, but suddenly Danon interrupted his thought, exclaiming, in anticipation, "A secret path? What else could it be, if not a path to secret treasures? They should go there quickly." Jim's eyes lit up with excitement, and she agreed with him, and who asked them to wait. "They can't just go in." Dawn asked, "Does he feel something?" He hesitantly answered that he doesn't, and the guild leader smiled, saying that he doesn't think everything will collapse here, so they will quickly go there. The rest of the team was glad that he allowed them to do this, and he honestly, since he was forced to agree with them. Dwan turned to Juno and told him to follow them, after which they all walked forward along the path, and soon came across an ice golem, which turned into a tragedy for them, hearing scream of the monster. Behind him, MC started to run and mentally exclaimed, "How did this happen? Everyone is dead except him. There shouldn't be such monsters in dungeons." He had never heard of a monster that magic couldn't track nice. He suddenly decided to turn around and, seeing the monster very close, realized that it was following him, after which the golem hit him, causing him to be thrown back, and he hit his back on the hard ice. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and he tried to get up on his striking hands, but the monster was already very close. MC thought that he couldn't die like this, and started to create a dagger, then grabbed it, and swung it with a loud crython. Threw it at the monster, but the blade bounced off the ice golem. Didn't pay attention to his attack, and had already managed to get closer to him, then dealt a powerful blow, because of which Juno fell through the ice and began to drown. As he fell to the bottom, he thought that now he understood what it was like. He had to rank support who can't even use basic effects like healing. He finally found a guild that needed him, but I tended with them abandoning him. It's so pitiful. He's sure someone else would have brought them more benefit. He closed his eyes, thinking that he didn't want to become awakened. This is his pipe dream. Suddenly the system told him that happened the flow. He met all the conditions to become a player after the message. His eyes suddenly opened, and then a bright light flashed in front of him, which illuminated his surprised and confused face, and the system greeted him. He looked in shock at the pop-up windows, one of which said that a new reward was available to him. He wanted to look at Eth, was so stunned by what happened that he simply fell into a stupor, and then air bubbles burst out of his mouth, and had mentally passed out, thinking that he did not know what was happening, but he did not care anymore. He reached out to the system window and pressed the agree button, clenching his teeth in despair, and then used his daggers to climb up and appear in front of the monster again. The system reported that he was receiving memories of his previous life. This moment, the protagonist's body was enveloped in an aura, and the monster attacked, and the system reported that this distribution of the reward was over. Juno's eyes widened as huge swords appeared around him, rushing towards the monster and piercing through its body, eventually causing it to fall. Juno suddenly felt a sharp pain in his head and gritted his teeth, wondering what was this. There were some strange memories in his head. Noticing something, he turned his gaze to the monster and saw that it had already approached him to deliver the next blow, after which a loud sound was heard. The monster's fist struck the ice shield that Juno had erected in front of himself in time. He thought, "Ish, not taking damage. It is a golem-like monster. It has incredible vitality. Heffled, weak," and immediately after that, his opponent broke through the shield, and he had to increase the distance, after which thought that if these memories were true, then even though it was a golem-like monster, its weak points and tactics would be the same. The so-called golem-like monster has no particular weak points. Even if it takes damage, it can recover. In this case, it is recommended to deal damage from different directions. At the same time, if possible, he needs to create a net with an equal range. Using the skill user as the center point, whoever gets caught in the net will move as the user sees. After creating the net, he summoned many swords, then clenched his hand into a fist. And these swords trembled, rushing at the monster at high speed, after which a loud crack was heard, and pieces of ice flew in all the directions. The golem fell apart and died, and MC walked up to Aiton's side with relief, thinking about how he thought this net world was just a support skill with which he could create atoms Faster it seems that the skill's efficiency increases, and it can also be used to attack independently. The system reported that the boss was defeated. Seeing the system window in front of him, he asked if he could view the monster or dungeon information. He received no answer and noticed a purple aura rising from the monster's body, turning into Asphere and falling on his hand. The system reported that the passive magic absorption skill was activated, and Heliking, added in surprise, exclaimed, "What is this?" After that, he decided to sort out all the events that happened to him. He received memories from his previous life. He does not know what exactly the previous life means, but this is definitely him. To be more precise, a different him, in a couple of years, in this future. The entire world has fallen, things too terrible to mention happened, and he inherited the memories of them. But even if this is the future, it may not be the future of the world he is in now. There are too many things that do not add up, even the status screen in front of him. This did not happen in his life. A system window appeared in front of him with a list of skills: creation, communication, rent payment, and online. World MC realized that he really became a player. This is a term used for the chosen ones who have awakened based on his memories. Players do not exist yet. At the moment, about 2 years later, a small number of awakened were chosen to become players. A blue screen appeared that only chosen ones could see in the future. This mysterious thing was called the system, which sounded more like a joke. It was enough to shock the awakened. Not only were the players given a system, they all received different rewards. For example, strength and skills, different from what they had before. Systems and rewards appeared out of nowhere. They were used by the players and caused them to grow rapidly, compared to other awakened, thanks to the guildmaster, who also happened to be the chosen one. The Dawn Guild he was a member of was able to become a first-class guild. He had no direct involvement in this, but it motivated him to grow. In order to boldly remain a developing guild, he constantly made efforts to develop his skills in the system window. You can see the skills you have learned, and the experience when first heard about the system. He thought it was convenient. In the end, it really turned out that way. If his skills and experience were carried over from his previous life, then the skill used on the golem's corpse was one that he didn't have in his previous life. He clicked on his skill to learn more about it. The passive skill magic absorption collects energy from the contaminated mana within the dungeon. If the amount of magic collected exceeds the limit, a reward will be given. He thought that he hadn't heard of players having something like this. Is the reward only given to him? He looked at the magic gauge. That was just starting to fill up, and thought that it was collecting energy from the contaminated mana. He had some ideas on how to get magic, deciding to think about it later. He walked over to the corpses of his comrades and nervously swallowed. First, he needed to deal with their bodies. Sometime later, at the Hunter Association headquarters, the girl approached her colleague, who was looking out the window, and asked if he could go home. He didn't understand what she meant, and she explained that it was strange. A small guild was clearing an unidentified dungeon and got into an accident. 4 out of 5 died, but the only survivor was a drank support. It wouldn't have been unusual if he had run away with the others were fighting, but that wasn't the case. He even took care of their bodies and delivered them to the association. The gate had already disappeared, so there was no more evidence to be found. What does he think? Felt like something was wrong. He didn't let her finish, and asked if she thought a D-rank support would have been able to kill those hunters. He hit her on the head with the file and told her to come to her senses. It wasn't a civil matter. She knew that herself. Even if something strange happened there was no way to find out what happened in the dungeon. They can only collect evidence as it comes to them. She rubbed the area where she was hit and agreed with a confused expression, but she still wanted to object, but he stopped her from doing so and asked if she had any suggestions. This happened quite often in their time. He stepped aside and waved the folder, saying that no hunters don't report the gates they find and go missing there. If they report to the association, they will hold an auction for entry. They all know that they will only get a small reward, so they risk their lives and go there secretly. After all, it's almost impossible for a small guild to win at an auction. Let her call him for additional investigation or something. She bowed slightly and bid him farewell, and at that time he went out into Thekarider and looked at the folder, thinking as his name, Shin Juno. He had already said this, but this didn't seem like a normal case. The situation was clear, but he still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. First off, all he acted too calmly during the interrogation he witnessed. The incident, with almost no experience in dungeon soi, would be logical for him to panic. Something was missing, but he explained everything clearly. Of course, it's possible that he's just that kind of person. He's met people like that before, but there's definitely something wrong here, but he doesn't know what it is, and it's upsetting him. He took a deep breath, deciding that he doesn't need to worry about it, he needs to check everything out. Juno was walking down the street at this time, looking at his phone, thinking that something was wrong. Was that an unidentified gate? He doesn't remember this dungeon in his past life, and all the guild members saw the gate application form. There was definitely an association stamp on it, but if the gate was registered as unidentified, could someone pretend to be the association to deceive the Dawn Guild, or is the association itself involved in this? But what worries him the most is that this might not just happen to their guild. As the investigator said, people going missing in unidentified gates has already become a problem. He doesn't know the whole story, but the news in all the guilds is about people going missing in unidentified gates again for the third time this year. They all have players like the guild leader Mund, Don, and even young talents who will become heroes in the future. He suddenly stopped and his legs trembled at the thought of Sumian wanting to wipe these heroes off the face of the earth. That means he has to hide his abilities carefully from now. One is the only survivor of an unsolved case. If he acts suspiciously, he will be targeted. He stretched out his hand and opened the system window, thinking that he has about years until the first player selection to prepare, but in the meantime, he needs to activate all his development skills. He needs to find a way to quickly develop without attracting attention. He looked through the system windows in search of a useful skill, and then his wandering gaze stopped, and he reached out with a smile, finding it a year later somewhere in Thefrist, in the middle of the mountains. The sounds of blows were heard, and sparks were visible. The hunter struck with his sword. The monster put a shield in front of itself in time, blocking the blow, causing the man's blade to crack and then break completely, making him very nervous after that. The monster hit him, throwing him back, but he was able to land successfully and stuck the broken sword into the ground, helping himself to stop. Then he looked up at the monster and, seeing that it decided to attack him in a jumped to the side and avoided the blow in time. He landed next to his team members and sighed heavily, and the enemy turned in their direction and threw AF. Look at them, this is the Lord Danger level D. This is a high-ranking null. His physical abilities are higher than that of an ordinary null. The null's skin is not only physically tough, but also resistant too. Magic. The hunter stood up and extended his trembling hand forward, asking what he was doing in an E-rank dungeon. Even D-rank hunters, said he, was hard to fight at that moment. Then I'll rush to attack, but the man with the shield reacted in time and stepped forward, blocking his attack with Hish held his hands, trembled from the powerful blow, and he shouted that they could not last that long. Let them Dao had they wanted, but they had to deal at least some damage to him. The swordsman's face darkened with horror, and he thought this was the death god of low-level hunters, but the No Lord was called that for more than just his physical abilities, since monsters at this rank are vulnerable to magic. Any hunting team relies on it, but this monster, Defisac logic, the hunters who were confident in low-level magic were afraid for the first time. The price of suck impudence and negligence is usually the complete destruction of the team. They only have one physical damage dealer. Bub's bad at melee, and his weapon is broken. There's nothing else to fight with, so what should he attack him with? Grabbed his head and thought that if he knew it would be like this, he wouldn't be greedy and would have gathered as many people as possible. Wow would have thought that his desire to use as few people as possible and hire a mage would backfire on him. Suddenly a ringing sound reached his ears, and he looked to the side. Being a guy chopping magic stones with a pickaxe, Ethis is an assistant. He doesn't participate in the battle, but plays the role of a collector and loader of cider sources such as magic stones. Anyone with even a small amount of mana sensitivity can handle this, so they didn't get much recognition and respect among the awakened. This is just the team's errand boy. The hunter said in Larambard that they had an assistant and thought that they were about to die, and he was just mining crystals. Suddenly what he saw made him surprised. The pickaxe in the hands of this assistant simply disappeared into thin air, and He thought, does he have the ability to create high quality? Cannot be expected, but they can still use it, he loudly called out to the assistant, after which he turned around. It was Juno. The man quickly approached him and asked cadexedly, is he a creator? Does he know how to make swords? He confirmed his words, and he showing his broken blade asked him to make him a sword, preferably a strong one. MC apologized and reminded that he is an assistant, not a support. At these words, the swordsman shuddered and exclaimed that it was not the time to say such things. Doesn't he see that they are about to die if they fail to cope with the boss? Then he will die. To Juno's side, heavily reluctantly agreeing to his request, then began to create, and said that he had one condition: when they clear the dungeon, they must all forget about his ability. When they start dividing the loot, then he wants to get as much as a support usually gets, if everyone agrees. Then he will help. The man looked at the new weapon in his hand in surprise, and then exclaimed with displeasure that for someone who could not become a creator and works as an assistant, the quality is quite mediocre. He thinks that he can clear a dungeon with just a weapon. This is simple. And how can he forget what he saw? Juno smirked and said that it was funny. The weapons in the hands of the others began to change, and he said that a good weapon is a necessary element for clearing a dungeon. After that he extended his hand to him with a wide smile and guaranteed that as long as they have this element, they will be able to clear the dungeon sometime later in the Overkill Guild, one of the 3 largest guilds in Korea. A girl named Miss walked down the hallway and stopped at the huge doors, after which she knocked, and Youngshin, sitting at the tableline, the room allowed her to go. She addressed him as the guildmaster and said that the association had sent a cooperation request. He asked if it was about the errors in the dungeon ranks. She confirmed his words and said that at first glance, it was a normal cooperation request, but it seemed like they were willing to pay as much as they said. Hef frowned slightly and turned his gaze to the system window, asking, they don't have a choice, do they? There was hardly another awakened who could enter the forcibly closed gate. The system window displayed news about recent events. Another, a rank-out dungeon, appeared. Fortunately, it was cleared successfully. He looked at the group photo of the team that cleared the dungeon. Suddenly he noticed a familiar face among them. He noticed Juno and thought that he had effing seen him before. A rank dungeon appeared in Kodan a couple of weeks ago. He was sent to the area, so he was at the scene, and he had definitely seen it there, according to the data. He was an assistant. Even if new ones appeared, chances of a bug in a dungeon are still small, and the cases of bug ranks with survivors can be counted on one hand. But this assistant was a member of a team that had survivors not just once but twice already. It can't be a coincidence. Who said that it seems like more and more bug-ranked dungeons have been appearing lately. A D-ranked dungeon a few days ago that became a B-ranked dungeon, and the entire team was instantly wiped out, the leader said. Bath Hunter Association must be in a lot of trouble. She added that there were a lot of people criticizing the association. After all, it was their job to analyze, predict and announce the dungeon ranks. Taeheon closed his eyes and rubbed his chin in confusion, thinking that that guy from the association must be suffering right now. He said, Bathos with the encroachment skill are getting more and more. They need to set up an additional committee to monitor the situation. What about what he asked her to look into? She replied that she searched everywhere, but couldn't find a single weaponsmith who was a rank or higher, but she received a B-rank weapon from a Japanese blacksmith. Does he want to check it out? He replied that she knew that any weapon below a rank would be destroyed when he used the skill, and wouldn't last long. He stood up from his chair and decided to start by saying that many guns are supports. Let her search some more, otherwise he'll ruin all his weapons like that. She replied that she understood everything. And then there was a knock on the door, and the vice gold leader named Mangan looked into the office, saying that something had happened. Tian got up from the table and walked towards him, asking what was wrong, and he replied that it was an urgent message from the association. He checked the location. It was a D-rank dungeon where the newbies went as a free tag team. He asked what the rank was now. He replied that it was now rank C. And Tian, after passing its side, and said that they couldn't lose the newbies. It seemed like an emergency, so he would get personally. Soon they arrived at the gate location, where the journalists had gathered. Noticing the presence of Overseer's guildmaster, they immediately turned around and started taking pictures of him, asking him to answer more questions. One of them asked him to say something about the ongoing errors in the dungeon ranks. He heard that the Hunter Association sent Overkill a proposal for cooperation. Is this true? Did he come in person because his guild members were inside? He ignored them, and the worried girl who was waiting for him thanked him for coming, and said that she didn't know he would come in person. He asked how the situation was. She turned to the gate and replied that the attack team that entered was 6 hunters, 2 supports, and 1 assistant. They were all stronger than necessary, but the numbers matter. Since the dungeon was now C rank, he asked how long ago they entered. She replied that it was about hours ago, and he, coming closer to the gate, said that he did not know how many of them were still alive, but he would do everything in his power. She bowed slightly and thanked him, after which he, along with the guild members, looked at the gate, and threw his case on the ground. He extended his hand to the secretary so that she would give him something, after which she reached into the bag with her hand, from which a bright light burst out and took out Asword. From there, she is a bank support who specializes in opening subspace, even in closed places. After that, she hand death weapon to the guildmaster, and he, covering the blade in flames, sharply waved his hand, striking the gate. High's encroachment skill activated, and a small crack appeared in the gate, which grew in size after a second. His skill, which forcibly breaks its way to the accumulation of mana, is capable of destroying any wall in the form of a barrier, including the gate. However, when moving to another dimension, the encroachment skill only affects the user. After such a blow, his sword broke, and he handed it back to Here's hands, and she asked him to be careful. He agreed. Anthon decided to go inside and passed through the crack in the gate. Once inside, he immediately stopped and looked around, feeling a different temperature and more humidity here, considering the disgusting smell there. Must be reptiles living here, judging by the fact that the floor is clean. It is a somewhat intelligent monster, considering the rank of the dungeon. The answer is quite a question. Lizard man, quite old. Humanoid reptiles are D-rank monsters. They live in tribal groups. Compared to other humanoid monsters, they live quite a long time life span proportional to intelligence and combat power. He noticed many monster corpses on the floor, stabbed with swords and arrows, and then headed to another room, thinking that by looking at the corpses he can guess the size of the group and their fighting strength, as well as the level of the injured party determined in the preliminary calculation. They must be dead by now. As he moved forward, he suddenly heard the sounds of fighting and voices. He can't help but think the worse. But when he arrived at the place where the team was, he saw something he didn't expect at all. The monsters were attacking, but the hunters blocked and immediately struck, acting in concert as a team. The girl fired an arrow, thought pierced the monster's body, and Taeheon froze in surprise and thought, are they winning? On the contrary, judging by their movements, the lizard men are much stronger. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by what he saw in the next second. One of the monsters knocked the weapon out of the hunter's hands, and he looked up at him in horror. Realizing that he was about to deal him a powerful blow, Taeheon rushed to help, thinking that it was not too late, and then suddenly lizard man dealt a powerful blow, but his attack was blocked by a suddenly summoned sword, which surprised him greatly. The hunter's breathing quickened from fear, and Guildmaster, who ran to help him, stopped and thought that it was magic, but immediately discarded this thought, realizing that it was a weapon made in the air. But who made it? Turned around and saw the assistant standing next to the crystals who summoned this sword. Noticing his Gazayunio, turned his head to the side, and their eyes met. He looked at the team members who were currently fighting the monsters and began to count them. When he counted 9 people, he turned his gaze to Taeheon and pointed his finger at him, saying that he was the TH. This is strange. He clearly remembers that. 9 entered. The guildmaster frowned and asked what he was doing at that moment. One of the team members blocked the attack, but the monster was stronger and was thrown back. The mage immediately ran to his aid, and the lizard man raised his sword above his head, preparing to strike. Seeing this, Taeheon became worried and immediately rushed to attack, taking out his sword, and MC looked down at his open suitcase and thought that he did not expect Yunnan to personally come to his aid. He is carrying around a weapon Thoth does not even use. Is it a spare? The hot wind caused by Taeheon's strike reached at his face. He covered his blade in flames and pressed harder on the opponent's sword, breaking through his block. Anthon told the guys behind him to step back. The mage helped his comrade stand up and thanked him for his help. after which Taeheon knocked the weapon out of his opponent's hands, and then reignited the flames and rushed past him simultaneously delivering powerful blows. The monster's body was covered in numerous cuts, green blood spurting out, for its corpse fell to the floor with a thud. Taeheon looked down at his sword, which was already pretty worn out, unthought that it wasn't even fighting at full strength yet. It was a bank weapon, but it was just too weak. He looked opened, saw the lizard man running towards him. The monster swung at him, and defended himself. Then jumped back, and ended up next to Juno, who called out to him. He asked, "Does this happen every time he uses a skill? It's a lot of wear and tear." "Right." The others rushed at the monster, and the guild leader asked, "Is he asking for trouble?" Suddenly blue sparks appeared in front of his face, and a weapon was created from them. Juno handed it to him, and asked him to take height, and not ruin his poor weapon. He looked up at the sword in surprise and thought, did he create this with one's wing? He is a weapon smith, and not just a simple one, but a very skilled one. He noticed the pick in his hand, and thought, why is he an assistant? He heard that low-rank supports sometimes enter Taeheon as assistant, but suddenly, MC interrupted his thoughts. He took the broken sword from his hand, and said, "Thought there is one condition after clearing and exiting the dungeon. Must forget about him and his skills." Taeheon reached out his hand to the new sword and asked if he thought he could forget just because he wanted to. In response to his words, Jun began to destroy the sword, and said that if not, then let him go, and slash everyone with his high-class weapon. The guildmaster sighed, and thought that the weapon would be destroyed. Once he used a skill on it, he thought a few more wouldn't hurt. He took the sword, and replied that he understood everything, and also promised him to forget about it, which he smiled and said that if that's the case, then let him go and burn. After that the guildmaster rushed Totak, and approached the furious lizard man, and then lit the sword with a bright flame, and attacked, causing tongues of flame to appear around them. The monster used more strength to try to hold back his attack, but in the end, his sword broke, and Taeheon thought that he just wanted to reflect the attack, but his weapon shattered. He looked down at the blade, and thought that the control was noticeably better than usual. Is the weapon itself that much stronger? He glanced at Juno, who was Gavin Crystals at the time, and thought, is he a weaponsmith who can create at least a bank weapon? At that moment, the monster decided to attack him with a broken weapon. He raised the sword above his head to swing, and Taeheon prepared himself and thought that this was interesting. Now he will see what it can do. Can he strengthen it? With these thoughts, he plunged the tip into the monster's stomach, and then used the skill causing blades flame to penetrate the monster's body and come out in a bright flash. Without wasting time, the guildmaster leaned on the monster's shoulder and jumped behind it, then jumped up and raised his sword above it, blazing with fire again. He plunged the blade into the monster's head and pierced it through, causing it to scream loudly. Anthon blood spurted out of its mouth, and the corpse fell to the floor. Taeheon, at this time, brought the blade to his face and carefully examined it, noticing that there was not a single scratch, so he needed at least. This suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by the voices of his guild members, who happily called out to him and said that they were alive. Thanks to him, he walked towards them and said that it seemed like no one was seriously hurt, which made him happy enough. The guys paid attention to Juno and said that with their weapon, they couldn't even fight, but they held out hands to him. The guild leader himself turned his gaze to him, thinking about something, and then approached him and asked what his name was. He asked why he needed to know the name of some assistant. He replied that they should at least know each other by name. He said his name, and Juno, having zipped up his backpack, turned to him, after which he stood up and approached him. Saying his name, he looked at the man behind him and said that he would leave the man a stone at the entrance. He agreed with a confused expression, and when Juno was about to leave, Taeheon stopped him and asked him to wait, offering him to come with him to the boss room, let him leave his things here. He took the backpack from his hands, and Juno said that he was just an assistant. The guild leader handed the backpack to the man and said that a bug had already been discovered in this dungeon. If they didn't defeat the boss, no one would be able to get out. Be it an assistant or a support, he replied that he could just defeat the boss. Taeheon said that as he had already seen no weapon could handle his skills, no matter how capable he wouldn't it be pointless if he destroyed the weapon he created. The MC replied with a hint of irritation that his weapon couldn't break, and he responded that he thought So, they are in a dungeon with a bug. The creatures living here are not ordinary lizard men, and if the boss is the same, then extra caution does not hurt. Juno sighed heavily, deciding to agree then through the backpacks on the floor and walked up to him asking does he just need to come with him. Soon they found themselves in a huge hall lit by torches frozen at the very entrance. They saw a throne at the other end of the hall on which sat the Lizard Lord of Danger. Level C+, this is the final form of Alizard man. After more than a years of survival and molting, despite its small size, it is several times superior in strength and speed to its relatives. Juno frowned, and Taeheon said with a smile that they should ignore the existing danger levels and information on them. They will just end this as soon as possible. They both used their abilities and Taeheon said that if they lingered, the weapon might fall apart. MC replied with displeasure that he had already said that it would not fall apart if he did not believe it. Then let him check. The Lizard Lord extended his hand towards them, and then pointed the tip of his spear towards them, ordering his lizard to rush to attack. As soon as the lizard struck, they both jumped back, and then Taeheon pushed off the wall and rushed forward. The lizard noticed this, and when landed very close it swung its paw, and at this time he held out his sword in front of him. The beast slacked, flashed its tail forward, sending a powerful stream of wind towards it, which forced him to increase the distance between them. And then he pushed off and rushed forward again, but this time the Lizard Lord was heading towards him. Their blades collided with a loud clang, and they both increased the distance between themselves. The Lord mounted his lizard, and it began to release tongues of flame from its mouth. Then a powerful stream of fire gushed towards the man. He wanted to block the blow with his sword, but Juno created a shield in front of him in time, thereby protecting him from the powerful stream, and he himself continued to stand aside watching the fight. At that moment, the lizard moved forward, throwing Taeheon back, and he, landing next to Juno, asked, "Isn't he a weapon?" Smith, he replied that a shield can also be a weapon. Has he ever been hit with a shield? He lit the sword with flames and said with a smile that when they get out of here, he will need to ask him about many things. After these words, he rushed towards his opponent, and the Lizard Lord waved his hand, throwing a chain from the spear, which had a tip. This chain hit the sword and twisted around the blade, after which the Lizard Lord jerked his hand back, pulling the enemy towards him. Taeheon was drawn straight towards the lizard's open mouth, and Julio, noticing this, extended his hand forward and told him to stop messing around and fight. He dispelled the weapon in Taeheon, letting it go, asked with a smirk, "Didn't he ask to test it?" A new weapon appeared in his hand, and MC tiredly told him to take care of his pet. After that, the chain-wrapped weapon that hadn't yet dispelled flew over the lizard's head, and Tan delivered several slashes to its mouth. Seeing the blood splattering, the monster was surprised, and then the man threw a sword at him, but he managed to dodge in time. In the blink of an eye, Taeheon got very close to him, and then kicked him with all his might, throwing him aside. The lizard Lord fell from thibity of his pet, and Taeheon at that moment rose high into the air, and swinging his sword lit it into flames again. What he saw made the monster nervous, and he didn't have time to do anything, and then he received a powerful blow that took away his arm. Realizing that he couldn't handle him, he turned his gaze to Juno, who hadn't participated in the fight, and grabbed his spear and rushed straight to him, but MC was ready for this, and just before the blow he erected a shield in front of himself, making the monster nervous, and then asked with displeasure who he thought he was pointing a weapon at. At that moment, Taeheon appeared behind the monster, blazing with bright flames. Lizard Lord didn't know what to do. He was pinned down from both sides. Meanwhile, the people outside continued to watch the gate. Seeing that the color changed to blue, they were glad that the gate was opening, and someone asked if they had really enrolled the dungeon. After that, the guild team came out of the portal, and journalists immediately ran to Taeheon, wondering what was in the dungeon and what happened to the boss. The guards fenced him off from them, and who asked if he was injured. He replied that everything was fine, and his guild members thanked him behind his back for his help, and the girls said that if it weren't for him, they would have already died. Juno, meanwhile, handed over that collected resources to the man, and said that he received the money in advance, so he needed to go. He thanked him for his excellent work, and MC, taking one last look at the team, simply left. One of the journalists meanwhile reached the head of the guild and asked how he managed to clear the dungeon so quickly. For him, it must be easy as pie. He turned around and said that he was not alone there, but not seeing Juno behind his back, he froze. The journalist asked if he had figured out while the whole team was defending themselves. The archer confirmed these words, and the warrior standing next to him said that their weapons had broken. They had no idea how dangerous it was. If it weren't for the guild leader, they would have been destroyed long ago. Taeheon was surprised by their words and grabbing the warrior by his shoulder exclaimed that the one who made them weapons should be thanked for them. Thanks to him they lasted so long. The guy asked in confusion who he was talking about. He replied that he was talking about the support who was there as an assistant. He was also a weaponsmith. The warrior, still confused, looked at him in surprise, and then awkwardly scratched his cheek and turned to the girl, saying that he knew the assistant was a support, but did he really have such abilities? She replied that she wasn't sure. After hearing their answer, Taeheon turned to the rest of the team and asked if they hadn't seen him create weapons. They all didn't understand what he was talking about, and someone asked if he meant a pickaxe. They looked at the backpacks they left behind where the pickaxe should have been, and someone said that he didn't even have that. Someone else from the team replied that he had a pickaxe, but he must have lost it. However, he had collected all the mana stones. Taeheon was confused and wondered what happened. He created weapons for them all, and they seemed to have forgotten about it. He remembered how Juno asked him to forget everything for creating the weapons and wondered in surprise, was this payment? How did he use Saya's skill that was a rank or higher? His friends called out to him, not understanding what was wrong with him, after which he threw the case with the gun into the hands of his deputy and ran off to look for Juno, and he called out to him loudly. He and his secretary looked after him in confusion, and he continued to run and look around thinking, where did he go? Did he really leave suddenly? He stopped and Juno was nearby and hiding behind a brick wall. Not seeing anyone around, Taeheon realized that he would not catch up with him, and at that moment his guild members ran up to him wondering what happened. He turned to Hu and said that right now Han needed to find someone. Hearing these words, MC pursed his lips in annoyance and closed his eyes. Then left. Time passed, and soon Hu came to the guild leader with the news that she had determined the location of Shin Juno. He entered the Drank dungeon near Segu around PM with a group of 5 people. He said that she did a great job. It was just around the corner from here. She notified him that she wanted to ask him something and said that Juno was just a D rank creator. Why was he so interested in him? Taeheon looked down at the tablet and asked if she thought so. Thought that of course he was a D rank creator, otherwise it was hard to think. He looked at his general information and thought that his status background, according to all the information, he was D rank, but he has AFE. This one's skill refutes everything. Fee is an A rank skill. As a fee for creating a user's item, it can make Thelander submit to the request. The nature and obligation of the request depends on the user's qualification. The qualification of the fee was very high. He had never met anyone who could use it like this. The ability to get rich was set to hide one's identity. A weapon like that could level up easily, but he would find out when they met him that time. He felt something he had never felt before. He remembered the feeling of holding the sword Juno had created and thought Thoth could fight at full strength without worrying about the weapon breaking. He had met many swordsmiths who were considered the greatest, but as soon as they presented him with their new products, he would pick it up with hope and try to use his skill on it. Even though these swordsmiths were confident in their products, but as soon as he dealt a powerful fire strike, he was immediately disappointed, because they all broke in the end. The swordsmiths were confident in their products, clutched their heads when they saw them broken. None of them lived up to Tien's expectations. Not to mention that the ability to create is limited to the type of normal weapons, but he creates something that greatly exceeded the ability and type limitation. It was as if there were no limitations with Juno's ability. It's possible this is something he didn't use because he didn't have the right weapon. The time to clear a Dranked dungeon with a team of 5 is usually around hours. There's about an hour left. With that thought, he got up from his chair and asked Hesu what was left on the schedule for today. She replied that he had a meeting with Guildmaster Hugh at PM. He passed her on his way to the exit and asked her to cancel the meeting. He'd leave early, Hugh hinted, to make sure he didn't miss it. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, the team was fighting the orcs. A warrior stabbed him in the stomach, causing him to die, and he watched his corpse fall, surprised, thinking that it couldn't be. Did Theo's assistant really make that sword? if that much. Mana could destroy a boss's weapon, it should be at least a C-rank ability maybe, even more when his weapon fell apart. He thought they were finished, but he never imagined that their assistant would have such an ability. He picked up the sword and laughed out loud, saying that it was simply amazing. He had never seen such a high-quality sword. He turned to Juno and thanked him for his help, then asked the girl if he was not in any guild. Maybe they should take him to theirs, she said. That was a great idea. And he said that he thought it was embarrassing for him to be an assistant. She asked if that was true, and he laughed in response, saying that he had a keen eye after listening to their conversation. MC turned his gaze to them and thought that he used more mana. Dan thought the team is suffering so much, even though it's not even a glitch dungeon. He walked to the place where the mana stones grew and threw his backpack on the floor, thinking that if he had some mana left that time everything would have been different. In that dungeon he felt an incredible amount of mana that he had never felt before. After defeating the golem, when he used it all up, it didn't appear anymore. What he feels now is no more than the mana of an awakened D rank, but he is comforted by the fact that there is no problem with creating weapons. He created a pickaxe and looked at it with the thought that who would have thought that Moris could help so much. The basic skill of a creator is creation, which helps in creating special items. All thought skill is very intuitive. The quality is proportional to the amount of mana used. There is one way to increase the efficiency of the skill, but it is still unknown. This is the level of comprehension. The higher the level of comprehension of the item being created, the better the quality. And the best thing about this skill is that, as the quality increases, the efficiency of mana also increases. So when using the same amount of magic and creating the same item, depending on the level of comprehension, there will be a significant difference in quality. He remembers how much he trained when he learned about this hidden feature, studying the material, training the support, going to the workshop for a weapon crafting class. But he got more than he expected. He started mining monostones by swinging his pickaxe and thought that he didn't know how much better it was, but compared to the amount of mana used, it seemed like more than just an addition. However, it was still not enough. It was hard for him to use crafting and payment at the same time with equipment that affects mana was expensive, so there was no way he could get it now. He could at least buy a mana potion, which was the only mass-produced item that affected mana. He needed to order a couple of those potions, but with assistant salary it would still be difficult for him. However, no one would hire a drink support, so he had no choice. Anyway, he opened the window with the passive skill mana absorption and thought that the result was not bad. It was coming. There was very little left to reach the goal of mana absorption %. A couple of dungeons would not be enough. One protected dungeon is just over a % to low efficiency. There is only one way left. Go to the dungeon with a bug. This is the only way to absorb a lot of mana at once. There, compared to other dungeons, several times more mana is absorbed. This is exactly the place he needs. He remembered Taeheon and thought that the problem is that the bug is hard to detect before entering the dungeon. The previous dungeon with a bug would have been difficult to pass, if not for that person. After collecting all the M-Man stones in his backpack, he went to the team members with the thought that he needs to find a dungeon with at least AC rank boss and prepare the only way to grow as a drank awakened is to know the reward of mana absorption. Soon the team successfully cleared the dungeon and went outside. Everyone thanked each other for their cooperation and said goodbye, and MC, noticing that they did not say a word about his ability, was glad that he erased his memories. Suddenly, a familiar voice, saying his name, made him freeze. He immediately turned around and saw that the Overkill guild leader approaching him along with secretary. Tian asked if he remembered him hearing this. MC realized that the skill didn't work on him. Then he sighed heavily and asked if he would believe him. If he said he didn't remember, he handed him a business card and replied that he wouldn't believe him. He took it and asked what business he came for. He replied that he needed to talk to him about something. Let him give him a minute of his time. Looking at the information on the business card, Mick thought that Overkill Guild was one of the best in Korea. He can't join such a big guild, yet he needs to find an excusito leave. After putting the card in his pocket, he turned around and said that he didn't have time. He was in a hurry for an important meeting, but Taeheon wasn't going to let him go so easily and put his hand on his shoulder, saying that he wouldn't regret this conversation. It wouldn't take long and he would also pay for dinner. Juno noticed the displeased look from his assistant and said that being the guild leader must free up a lot of his time since he was spending eating a D-rank support. He replied with a smile that it might be so, after which MC looked at him closely and thought Thoth didn't really like it. But he needed to check how well the payment worked for him. Passing by him, he agreed to talkingly if it was quick, and Tien smirked, agreeing. After that, they arrived at a restaurant and took a table in a private room. When the table was set with various dishes, MC asked what business the Overkill guild leader has with a D-rank support. Like him, he doubts it's because he has a lot of free time to chat with him. Tien said that, from what he saw, he's a berserker because of his incredible strength. He needs a weapon that can withstand such a load. So the most important thing in a baker's job is to find a supplier of suitable weapons. Of course, he went to many places to look for it. He traveled around the country and beyond, starting from a blacksmith, who was called the best in his field, and ending with weaponsmiths. If there was even the slightest opportunity, he would order a weapon, and time and money would not matter, but every weapon he had could not withstand his ability, with one exception. The sword that had created the protagonist's face showed no emotion, and he understood only one thing: the agreement had absolutely no effect. He didn't think that Berser had a nullification skill. That was very careless of him. He needs to be more careful, using that skill on high-ranking hunters. Tian called out to him and said with a serious expression that he would ask him directly. He wants to join his guild. His proposal made who surprised and said that he already knew that he was not a member of any guild. If he joined, he promised he would only get the Bessie would pay him $1,000,000,000 for joining, and they would also pay for the operating costs and dividends separately. Would make a contract for a year, and each time it was renewed, the fee would increase by percent. The rest of the details would be in the contract. Junito didn't let him finish, and stood up from the table apologizing to him and saying that he didn't plan on joining the guild for now, so he would have to refuse if that was all he was leaving. Thanked him for the food with a slight smile, and then left the room, and Tian called out to him, trying to stove him, who asked why he made such an offer. He couldn't do it without a reason. She wanted to say something about the conditions, but he interrupted her and said that if she had experienced the same thing he did, then she wouldn't have said that it had been a long time since he hadn't felt the scream of a weapon. With such a weapon, it seemed that he could do anything, and it held up. She wanted to object, and he, taking a sip of his drink, said that, of course, it wasn't only because of this feeling. How much did she think all those high-ranking weapons he destroyed in a year cost? His words made her remember that he spent truly astronomical amounts on weapons. Despoteth, fact that they break, unable to withstand the load. If the weapon is not above a certain rank, it will not allow the guild leader to use his abilities. After thinking about it, she agreed with him and said that if it were possible, Thon, such a fee for making a contract is really insignificant, but for now the problem is that no one is capable of sack. A thing considering those who were called the best. The fact that he has such an ability. He did not let her finish, and said that he can definitely do it. She flinched, and he continued saying that therefore no matter what haste, he wants to recruit him at any cost. Time passed. MC walked down the street inside, thinking that who would have thought that the day would come when he would refuse the top 3 guilds in the top Overkill, and Yunnan, it would help him a lot, but it is too early for now. It's okay, he just needs to be patient. He will definitely find him again. Meanwhile, in an unknown dungeon, there were a bunch of goblin corpses lying on the floor, and the hunter witnessed his comrade being cut off of them. After catching his breath, he looked nervously at the one who did it and asked who he was. The man plunged the sword into the hunter's body and said that it was quite entertaining at times, like these people usually whine and beg to be saved before they pass out. The one who will become the hero is different. He looked at the only survivor with a smile, and the guy asked why all of a sudden he wanted to kill them and take the trophy. Replied that it was not that boring. He did not want to tell him. He pulled the sword out of the corpse and said that he thought telling something to someone who was about to die would be a waste of energy, but he would tell him, I've defeated him. He threw the sword over his shoulder with a smile and told him to come to him quickly if he did not want to die. The hunter gritted his teeth and thought that he was definitely a difficult opponent. He would die at a distance. Deciding to close the distance between them, he rushed forward with a loud cry and thought that he had to go in if he lost an arm or a leg in response. The man put his sword in front of him, blocking his blow, and the hunter screamed, loudly putting all his strength, after which he began to throw new blows, which he parried, watching the sparks caused by the blows of the swords. The man suddenly knocked the weapon out of his opponent's hands, throwing it high above his head. The hunter looked up at the sword in surprise, after which his opponent kicked him with all his might, throwing him to the other side of the hall. The hunter hit his back against the wall and trembled in pain, and he said that it was so sad dragging the sword along the floor. He walked towards him and said that he volunteered because this was the first destruction of a hero, but who would have thought that he would turn out to be only a small fry, but the courage it took to do this is worthy of praise. When his shadow covered the hunter, he asked him for forgiveness with tears in his eyes and began to beg for mercy, but he did not care and raised his sword over him, smiling, saying that he would deal with him. After that he dealt him a fatal blow from which a lot of blood spurted. He looked down at him with disappointment and cursed, saying that he thought that for the first time in a long time he would have to fight. But this is not even a warm-up. What is with that expression of injustice on his face? Let him not worry, he will report that he fought bravely with the boss and died a hero. Taking out his phone, he took a photo off corpse and said with a smile that this is a common thing in a dungeon with a rank error. After finishing with Thish, looked through the photos and said that this is not bad, the collection has been replenished. Then he flipped through the photos of the rest of the dead and added that his whole life is dedicated to collecting. Suddenly, for some reason, it felt a chill. He told the priestess with displeasure that he hated feeling this vile energy. Let her either hide, eat, or not hide anymore. The doors to the hall opened and the priestess entered. She waved at him with a smile and apologized, saying that she was in a hurry because she heard that there were valuable components here. He pulled a sword out of the corpse and replied that there were only idiots here. So he said not to listen to him and wait a little longer. She walked past him and without letting him finish, threateningly asked, did these words mean that you to go against the will of the executioner? Her body was enveloped in energy, and he sighed with displeasure, saying that she was so sensitive. He just said it like that. Let her clean up here. She used her abilities and agreed, telling him to leave everything to her. She was a pro at this. He reminded her with a gloomy expression about her promise that she would send him after Anne shrank. Hunter, because of this consciousness or something, he needs to okil them. He can't use his power to the fullest. He goes with her only fourth. This priestess approached the hunter's corpse and, creating a bloody magic circle over it, told him not to worry. She would contact him soon. A glow appeared inside the wound on the corpse, and he asked who. This time, someone's claw paw appeared from the body of the dead hunter. The monster climbed out, and the priestess, looking up at him with an admiring smile, called him a child, and happily exclaimed that he was right. A tall monster like a man whose body was burning with energy appeared in front of her. Time passed. A new day came. Association guards and ordinary onlookers crowded at the open gates. Juno, who arrived to clear this dungeon, noticing someone familiar, looked at him with displeasure. Taeheon, who also came here, hid his face, adjusted his cap, and asked if he was here. There was silence between them, and after a short pause, the MC asked what he was doing here. He said that he had good eyesight, since he recognized him right away. He noticed the case on his back and said that he only knew one person who carried a weapon like that. So what is he doing here? He replied that he was going to the gate of Juno, clarified a D-rank gate. Taeheon replied that the guild member who was supposed to go suddenly fell ill, so he would go in his place. Juno didn't believe him and was about to ask what the point was, but suddenly one of the 10 members called out to them and said that it was time for them to go. Taeheon passed by him and suggested that he enter the dungeon, and he looked after him, thinking that he knew he would find him again, but he didn't think it would be so soon. He decided to accept it and thought that he needed to make adjustments to his plan. After that, they passed through the gate and found themselves inside a spacious cave. They were walking slightly behind the rest of the team, and Taeheon, looking at Juno, asked why he didn't join the guild. He replied that he had already refused. He didn't want to talk about it anymore. One of the guys asked if he heard about the gate auction that was on Trenin this morning. The guy confirmed the girl's words and said that they said that high on Miss Guildone. She said that her friend was there. She heard that they named such a high price that no one even tried. Juno was interested in this and thought, did they really find something there? Taeheon asked if he was interested in buying a gate if he joined the guild. he will be able to easily purchase special gates above bank. It's not only because of their resources the guild's name gives. Certain privileges joining a guild can mean a lot to an awakened people adore and admire big guilds. The hunter will not only get a job, but also better income and rewards compared to others. In addition, by becoming part of a guild, the hunter can enjoy various benefits of the guild's influence. For example, he can get an entrance ticket to a special gate. It requires more than just skills or abilities, but also the dynamics of political relationships with this structure. The rare treasures that can be obtained in such places are naturally seized by large guilds. Taeheon said that he probably has a goal that he is aiming for. As an awakened one, whatever it is, it will be easier to achieve with. Overkill does not understand why he is refusing. MC sharply responded that it is none of his business, and he understands he is acting like this because probably no one has ever refused an offer to join Overkill, so he will make it clear he will not join any guild under any circumstances. These words made Taeheon surprised, and he froze in place. He thought, is it because of the injury he received after the destruction of the Dawned Guild that he read a Webtoon the report, or is it something else? Whatever it is, he can't give up. Time passed. They moved deeper into the cave, and the mage girl, walking in front, began to light the way. They looked around, and suddenly the guy bumped into something and exclaimed, "What is this?" He touched his hair and, feeling some kind of threat in his fingers, asked, "Is this a web?" The girl raised her staff higher, helping to see everything, and the team leader stepped forward, saying that this is where the monster territory begins. It seems that all the hunters here are newbies, so he will explain briefly, although he is sure that everyone read the intel. Legion spiders appear here. The difficulty level of each creature is low. The peculiarity is that they live in groups according to the reconnaissance Uthor are about of them, which is not many. They have paralytic poison in their fangs, so they should be careful they can't let them bite you. Taeheon crouched down and took out a sword from his case, then turned to Juno and said that they were about to appear, so let him come closer. He sighed with a grin and told him not to worry about the assistant and just prepare for battle. Taeheon replied that all combat units must protect the supports and assistants. This is a rule of thought all hunters must follow regardless of ability and situation. It is so whether he wants it or not, MC said with a dissatisfied face, that no one adheres to such principles anymore. But suddenly his words were interrupted by a team member shouting that they were coming. Hearing the sounds, everyone immediately prepared themselves and raised their heads to the ceiling, and then the sound became louder. The sharp claws of the spiders hit the ground, and they began to approach them, moving along the walls and ceiling. Seeing the monsters, the swordsman trembled in fear and told himself to calm down. They would win if they did as they were taught. Out of the darkness came the spiders of the Legion, personal danger level E, and in the group there, danger level D. Minus the danger level changes depending on the size of the Legion. Seeing a whole horde of monsters, the hunters prepared themselves, after which the Spider Legion sped, opened, rushed to attack. The swordsman took a stable stance and swung his weapon, killing one spider, and then gritted his teeth harder and struck again. Meanwhile, the man in front of him held back the monsters with his shield, then gathered energy and hit them with it, throwing them back. The girl used magic, causing sparks to come from the staff, ricochetted forward and pierced the spiders. Watching their fight, Taeheon thought that this was not bad for a drink, so he did not have to worry about them. Juno, who was looking at the other side of the corridor, let out a surprised psycho saying Taeheon to turn around and said that it didn't seem like there were a few dozen spiders. The spiders then jumped down from the ceiling and pounced on them, and Taeheon used his skill to swing his sword, frying several spiders, causing their charred bodies to fall to the ground. He continued to attack and thought that the durability of these spiders was quite low compared to other monsters. He only needed to release some sword G. He didn't even need to use Theblade. This way, he could finish the raid without losing his weapon. He continued to fry the spiders, and a cry for help was heard from behind him. The three team members were surrounded by a huge group of spiders on all sides, and the battle was becoming increasingly difficult for them. The team leader exclaimed that they were continuing to advance. Who saw there were spiders here? There were at least several hundred here who even went on reconnaissance. The swordsman said that it would be hard for them, and the girl behind him announced that she was running out of mana. Deciding to go help, Taeheon rushed towards them. and called out to Juno, telling him to follow him, but he went in the opposite direction and said that he had better help them and he would finish and come later. The guild leader stopped looking at him in confusion, seeing Taeheon was heading towards the monsters and one of them attacked him. In the air he immediately rushed towards him and worriedly told him to lie down on the ground. He thought that if he did not use the sword Shay, he would get hurt. MC at that moment froze in place and closed his eyes, after which she opened them and they changed in color, reflecting an ethit appeared under the ceiling. The spider that got under this net was immediately pierced by a sharp blade. Taeheon was very surprised by such a sight as the spider's corpse fell in front of Juno's feet. He thought that out of all weapons he could create right now, the sword would be the best quality. It would be more effective to create multiple swords and use them all at once, but with his current amount of mana, that was impossible. He waved his finger slightly, pulling the sword out of the corpse, then pointed forward and thought that he couldn't come up with anything better than this anyway. At his command, the sword rose into the air and began to circle around him, waiting for his next command. Noticing the spiders nearby, MC turned around and pointed his finger at them, sending the sword flying, approaching the monsters. The sword pierced one spider in its path and then moved on to the next one, moving quickly with just one wave of his hand. Juno controlled the sword, causing it to circle around the cave at a furious speed. At one point he raised his finger to the ceiling, pointing at the rest of the spiders, after which the sword rushed at Furt and swirled around him like a tornado, piercing everything in its path. When it was all over, Taeheon looked at Jim in surprise and at the many corpses that were at his feet, and then turned his gaze to the sword stuck in the spider's body. He thought in confusion, was that an area attack? Watching the sword dissolve, thought that in less than seconds of fighting he dealt with all those dozens of spiders. Did he use materialization in battle? He didn't even know that supports could fight like that. Noticing his gaze, Juno pointed his finger at the rest of the group and asked, "What is he doing? Isn't he going to go help them?" Because of his words, Taeheon remembered the rest of the guys he initially ran to help and turned around, seeing that they were already barely standing. Noting that the situation was not the best, he used his skill to tell them that they would talk when it was over. Before he left, Juno called out to him and pointed at the corpses behind him, asking him to deal with it. After Alfie wouldn't think that the assistant did it anyway. Taeheon pulled down his mask, thinking about it for a second, then pushed off the ground and rushed forward, setting the corpses on fire. Soon the battle was over, and the team members gathered together to rest. The hunter thanked Taeheon for his help and said that they survived, thanks to him, but he was a little surprised at first. He thought he looked familiar, but who would have thought that he was the guild master of Overkill? Taeheon apologized for not telling him about it right away and explained that he wanted to quietly explore the dungeon. The mage was very excited to find out who he really was and thanked him, after which she admiringly said that it was so cool to watch him deal with all those spiders. She was a little embarrassed and hesitantly asked if it would be possible to take a photo with him when they left here. The hunter, who returned to them with Juno, did not let her finish, loudly saying that they were back, and she made a dissatisfied face and thought that she had such a wonderful opportunity. The guy apologized to them with a smile for being late. They began to collect side resources. They walked around, and it seemed that there were no more monsters here. He pointed to a dark corridor and said that there was another passage over there. He thought they could go further. The leader sighed heavily and said that he did not think they were able to continue clearing. It was a pity to do this, but they shouldn't. Here, the swordsman exclaimed in surprise that there was very little left. Why did he decide that? The man stood up and crossed his arms over his chest, saying that the number of spiders they encountered, the geography of the dungeon, everything was different in the intelligence report. Dungeons exist with gates separate from the world dungeon, an area with strange creatures and geographical features that cannot be found on Earth. At the moment, the concept of dungeons and awakened ones is not fully defined, so for those who are new to hunting, the most important thing is information about dungeons. Few awakened ones can adapt to a dungeon if they have never encountered one before. This means defeat, and in the worst case, death. This is how scouts were born. Awakened ones with the ability to detect or hide their tracks band together and begin collecting intelligence on the dungeon. The rank of the strong dungeon increases after such reconnaissance, and so they began to be called scouts. The accuracy of The scouted ones usually exceeds percent. It is unlikely that this is just a mistake. Cannot be ruled out that this is also a dungeon with a rank error. The swordsman was confused and wanted to object, then turned his gaze to Taeheon and asked if the guildmaster is with them. Maybe they can continue. The man said that he understands that. They want to continue clearing, but the help of the guildmaster is not enough. If they are not careful, everyone may end up in danger. The guy said in a frustrated tone that he really wanted to clear the dungeon. He had personal reasons. Is there really? No way. The girl also said in a frustrated tone that she wanted to finish the dungeon, and he asked what could be more important than life. If they entered the boss room, there would be no turning back. He didn't want to leave either, but they needed to go out and report the situation first. The guild leader joined the conversation and said that he agreed with them. The team leader looked at him with a puzzled look, and he said that even if he came here to study everything, he was still a member of the team. If the leader decided to continue clearing the dungeon, he had no reason to object, but if he wanted to study everything, he needed to get into the boss room. He glanced at Juno, and he nodded in agreement, and the man bowed to him and said that he would trust him with this. Then he thanked him and started talking about being the team leader, but Taeheon told him not to worry and to continue leading. The man agreed and said that they would be heading out. Then he told the others to follow him, and as they passed through the huge passage, they found themselves in front of some doors. The team leader stopped and said that he thought they were at the boss room, so he would give out some final instructions. First off, the boss of this dungeon is a ranked plus Legion Spider Queen. Her overall combat ability is quite high. She is considered a fair Lycee boss, mainly giving birth to Legion spiders, but that is just the initial information. They don't know what kind of creature will be behind that door. He pushed the doors forward, opening them, and said that they are coming in. The doors slowly opened, filling the room with light, and they walked inside, lighting their way. They continued to move forward, and Taeheon frowned slightly, thinking that he didn't feel any special signs, none at all. The team leader held up a shield in front of him and told the others to get ready. Then they saw a huge spider hanging from the ceiling, and he shouted that it was the boss. The swordsman asked, "Is this the Spider Queen they were talking about?" The mage said with relief that it was good that the boss was the same. Then she pulled out her staff and exclaimed that she would attack first. She conjured a cloud of sparks, which she threw forward, and all the monsters were struck by an electric discharge. She clenched her hand into a fist in joy, but then suddenly her eyes widened in surprise. The corpse of the Spider Queen fell. Her body was cut up and half of her abdomen was missing, but this clearly did not happen because of the mag's attack. Seeing this, the team leader became nervous and thought, is the boss already dead? He had never heard of such a thing. Realizing that something was wrong, he told the team that they were leaving, after which they all felt a powerful pressure coming from the corpse and wondered what it was. Another queen's paw landed on the spider's torn belly, screaming loudly and spreading her arms out to the sides, calling her army. This is Arachnib plus rank. She is the queen who rules all kinds of spider-type monsters. She has high intelligence and is very cunning, does not reproduce, but invades the territories of other monsters of the same type and increases her army at their expense. She can house her power with her minions. Arachne smiled, looking at the frightened people, and then waved her paw to finish them off. But suddenly a flash of flame appeared on her path. Taeheon blocked her blow with a sword strike and looked upon her, thinking that, who would have thought that this monster would appear here? If the hunter does not know how to handle a sword, then he will not leave even a scratch on her from one blow. His sword had already cracked, and he thought that he needed to bear as much damage as possible with one blow. After that, he rushed to attack and struck the monster's stomach, causing his blade to immediately split into pieces, and he cursed in his mind. Leaving a deep wound in Arachne's stomach, he jumped back and thought that the sword had broken. He would not be able to deliver a fatal blow. The moment he landed, the Spider Queen had already swung her pot to strike, but suddenly collided with a sword that suddenly appeared, which blocked her strike, protecting Taeheon. Stepped forward, and the guild lead her to stall for time while he created a new weapon for him. Arachne turned her attention to him and slightly narrowed all three pairs of eyes, smiling evilly. The moment he created a weapon for him, suddenly felt something and shuddered, and looking down at his palm, he wondered, did he use up all his mana? Thinking that it was already incredible that he could hold out for so long, he took out a bottle of potion from his pocket. After drinking it, he thought that the potion can only be used once a day. If you drink more, you will develop an addiction. He threw the bottle aside, and feeling a surge of strength, said with a smile that the effect is good. Juno meanwhile was very worried, and a second later a sword appeared in front of him, and the creator of it told him to stall for time. After that he turned to the rest of the party and thought that Arachne is a banked boss, if not for the mistake. There should only be one C-rank boss called the Spider Queen. Good thing Taeheon is here. It would be hard for them to deal with this monster. Not only does the danger level exceed, the level itself changes at that moment. The new Spider Queen swung her paw, striking, and her opponent immediately parried it, swinging his blade. After that, she started to throw quick punches with a smile, which he immediately parried, and Juno, watching them, thought that the pure combat power exceeded 5A ranked fighters. Regarding Arachne's ability, it is impossible Torley. On Taeheon alone, he told the rest of the party to stand up, they will have to be ready to fight. Arachne changed her target. The party leader nervously exclaimed, "Who is he?" The other stood up and asked why did such a talented awaken come here secretly under the guise of an assistant. The girl exclaimed, "Did he come with the guildmaster?" He turned to them and, pointing to the small spiders that were rushing towards them, said that they needed to sort out something first. He waved his hand, creating a weapon, and told them to choose. Would they take the weapon in front of them and clear the dungeon fighting the spiders, or run away and wait outside for everything to be decided? He extended his hand to them and said that he was sure they would make the right choice. After that, the party members took up their new weapons and entered the battle. The swordsman swung his sword, cutting through the spider body with ease, and thought it was incredible. He had never held a weapon like that in his hands. He swung it a few more times, preventing the spiders from attacking and looking at the clean cuts on their bodies. He thought it was like cutting paper. Was it really that easy to kill monsters? Suddenly, a loud cracking sound distracted him from the battle. The mage girl used magic, and her staff began to emit electrical sparks, and she enjoyed the sight so much that she smiled widely after that. She confidently swung her staff and brought down flashy soft lightning on the spiders. The team leader was very surprised. He thought that only the weapon had changed, but the power of the skills had increased several times. He created such a good weapon. After the girl's blow, only Charcorp corpse remained on the ground, and the team leader, turning his gaze to Juno, exclaimed in his thoughts, "Who ish?" Meanwhile, Taeheon's sword was still intact. He caught his breath after a series of blows and gritted his teeth, thinking that this was to be expected. From a banked boss, it was difficult to buy time. His opponent smiled widely and then screamed loudly, leaning towards him, and her body already had many cuts from his blows. Igniting the sword with flames again, he thought that he needed to end this as soon as possible. An Arachne in the light emitted by his blade froze for a moment. After that, Taeheon rushed to attack, but she was not going to give up so easily, and swung her hand, but he was faster and dealt a powerful fire blow from which she immediately fell. After that, he looked down at the blade and thought that the weapon was still intact. It was better than he imagined. Suddenly, on the ground, he noticed many small spiders, and the girl, looking around anxiously, exclaimed, "Where they come from and where are they going?" The team leader exclaimed that they were all going to the guildmaster. Chin turned to them and ordered them to retreat back, after which he thought, did she hide the spiders? The situation is complicated. She activated her ability. The spiders completely covered the wounded place on Arachne's body, and Taeheon said that she sacrificed the spiders, with which she restored her health. After that, all the wounds on Arachne's head were healed, and she looked up at her opponent and then pushed herself off the ground with her hands, helping herself to stand up, and again towered over the man, looking up at the SP Fighter Queen and the 1,000 small minions behind her. He said that until they killed them all, she would revive again and again. He activated the skill and rushed to attack, thinking that he needed to increase his firepower to end everything with one blow. Suddenly, his blade cracked, and Hanatais hinked this cursed loudly, and at the same time, MC said with a smile that he was better than he imagined. He stretched out his hand forward, creating a weapon again, and said that, although he created a sword from the remains of mana, but he did not think that it would destroy it. After that, a huge sword was stuck into the ground near Tien's feet, and Mick told him to take it. It is not a one-handed sword, unlike the ones he used before, viewed it as the strongest weapon he can create at the moment. Tian worthlessly placed his hand on the hilt and thought that heffled it. As soon as he took hold of the sword, he felt that with this weapon he could defeat them all. In one blow, the blade in his hand immediately caught fire, and fiery cracks began to spread out from the tip along the ground. He smiled and said that he was not very familiar with two-handed swords, but it seemed to suit him after that. He pulled each sword out of the ground and, putting all his strength into holding it, gritted his teeth and rushed forward. As soon as Ash was close enough, he swung the sword and delivered a powerful fire strike. Arachne became nervous and gritted her teeth, and her face was illuminated by a flash of flame, which soon pierced through her body, and a powerful explosion was heard. Juno thought that the explosion was a basic berserker skill. This was probably the first time Tand was using it in full berserker. Loses control of himself in exchange for gaining overwhelming power. So Heprabai didn't use it, because it's hard to handle the risk that would come with having the weapon shatter into pieces. Tian, meanwhile, lowered his sword and stood still, and then flames started coming out of his mouth immediately.